Sanctuary has always been trapped amid the eternal conflict. A war between angels and demons. But Lilith serves neither side.
Diablo 4 takes place a half-century after Reaper of Souls, and to set the stage for the return of Lilith during a time of despair post-Malthael's reaping, known as the Reign of Enmity, a 50-year schism between 1286 to 1336, let's break down the confirmed events and characters' whereabouts peppered through panels, press, and even in-game items. Starting with the events that happened post-Reaper of Souls, according to ex-game director Louis Barriga, who shares.
That's right, let's set the stage a little bit. Alright, Diablo 4 takes place decades after the events of Reaper of Souls. Though Malthael's plans were foiled, the Angel of Death exacted a terrible toll on humanity, and Sanctuary suffered great devastation. Entire populations decimated, cities ravaged. Heaven itself suffered great losses, causing them to shutter their gates. You can
close the gates. That's terrible.
And you can imagine what that does to people. Religious schisms, famine, war, basically humanity left to our own devices. And we know how well we do on our own.
Not so good.
Which then begs the question, why would heaven shutter their gates? Well, as we see in official art of what happens to be the Silver City during a developer's update, heaven appears more akin to an outpost of hell. So then, what of humanity's greatest angelic ally, Tyrael? Well, ex-lead game designer Jesse McCree posited.
And we know that the last time we saw Tyrael, he was in heaven and he was mortal. It's hard to say where he is at this point. Without giving an exact date for the storyline, there's a lot of possibilities for where Tyrael might be. Previously in Diablo games, we've had usually a Herodic representative, and if you guys watch the gameplay trailer, you see we have a character, he's wearing a Herodic necklace. Maybe that's somebody important, that's someone to keep an eye on.
We also know that the Horodrim Order, resurrected by Tyrael prior to Reaper of Souls, is now a shadow of its former glory, as described by Louis Barriga.
And with heaven having closed their gates, there's no one to answer our prayers. Even the Horodrim are but mad old men talking to themselves, talking to graves, clutching their bottles as hard as they once clutched their swords.
Although unsubstantiated, a noteworthy moment in the Diablo 4 gameplay trailer shows a grief-riddled Lilith drinking by a grave with cloth draped over it, the same color as Tyrael's tunic. Congruently, we officially see, albeit briefly during the release trailer, a stout member of the Horodrim, Donan.
Donan, he's one of the Horodrim. He is this very gifted mage who also is a scholar. We find him in this place called Scotland, where he's made a name for himself and become something of a hero. In Diablo 4, we'll find out what Donan's relationship with Lorath is and the Horodrim, and how he became a hero in this place.
Who, like Lilith, has suffered great loss, which perhaps was the leader Tyrael, as in the Book of Lilith it's revealed. At some point, Donan's given a potion by Tyasa, allowing him to deal with his festering grief. The potion required several ingredients found in marsh and swamp, including ichor from the Maggot Queen. Also of note, there is a lack of holy warriors present to defend Sanctuary. It is confirmed that the paladins of the Zachroom mainly were absorbed into the Knights of Westmarch during Diablo 3. However, the Crusaders somewhat took their stead, being the warriors sent to contend with the prime evil by the Zachroom Church. So, what officially happened to the faith? During March 2022's quarterly update, the developers shared, the Orbe Monastery is an isolated and secretive feature in the rural dry steppes. While the Zachroom's presence has diminished, the Orbe Monastery carries evidence that places of worship for the Zachroom can still quietly function. And I'll also share at the end of the video the lore panel excerpt about the Zachroom Order's decline during the Reign of Enmity. However, first, there are several in-game items that share gems of revelatory information about the world and characters of Diablo 4, such as the necklace, the word of Hakan, the boy emperor of Diablo 3, which reads, "Let the great gates of Chaldean be sealed. Let its proud walls stand fiercely defended. The rest of Khezestan may suffer this plague, but my city and my people will not." proclamation of Hakan II, and we learn how the Church of Light's faith was reignited due to the gloves of the Illuminator, reading, "After Inarius returned to Sanctuary, he sought a way back to the high heavens. His first step was to reignite the religion he had abandoned millennia before, the Cathedral of Light. Although, officially, we do not know much yet about the shadowy Triune-affiliated summoner, Elias, who was responsible for resurrecting Lilith. We do know, thanks to the flavor text of the ring Mother's Embrace, the motives of why he would choose to ally with the Mother of Sanctuary, which reads, "Every tome, every book, every scroll in this temple produces the same answer. The only being willing to stand against the eternal conflict, against the prime evils, was Lilith." To end the video on locations and the peoples during the events of Diablo 4, here is a chunk of the lore panel where the developers discuss each in great length. Enjoy.
Here, and you see this dotted line that kind of connects the two, and it just got my imagination going about all these crazy adventures that my character maybe saw off screen that I never really got to experience. But for the first time, we really get to see all of that space together, and that's super, super rad. So I'm really excited to start talking about this stuff. So let's dive right in. So let's start at the very top of the map with Skazglen. So, who's played the demo so far this weekend? Awesome. So if you played the demo, you got a very small glimpse of what Skazglen has to offer. This is the ancestral home of the Druids. If you played the Druid class, which is available in the demo, this is where their secrets are hidden all throughout this region. This is sort of an untamable, rugged, beautiful land with these deep forests, these rocky highlands, but it's also savage and sort of untamed and wild. There is this constant gloomy rain, this constant fog. There are these creatures hiding in the forest, waiting to drag you back into the forest, or these monsters like the drowned waiting to pull you back into the ocean with them. The people who live in Skazglen are constantly pushing back against this encroaching wilderness. Goatmen are slaughtering farmers mere feet from the torchlight of their towns. It feels weird to smile while I say that. But the people who live in these towns huddle together in their little huts, hoping their numbers will keep them safe. But the moment they leave the safety of civilization, they find themselves lost and surrounded by these feral nightmares. To the south of Skazglen, we have the region known as the Dry Steppes. This is a war-ravaged region. Say that 3 times fast. It has these amber grasslands, these deep canyons, these wide salt flats dotted with geysers of boiling hot water. This is an incredibly difficult place to live. If you try and live here, only the very ruthless or the very desperate choose to call the Dry Steppes their home. If you live in this place, you're either a predator or you're prey, right? There are violent wars between these groups, like the power vacuums that Sean mentioned earlier, that have opened up. There's different groups that are trying to take their spotlight now in this vacuum. They're trying to win the hearts of the minds of the people who live in these regions. And with Lilith's return, that darkness that's sort of within all of us, all of humanity, since we're both angel and demon, has started to sort of rise, and many people sort of give into it, give into these dark powers, and turn to things like cannibalism for more power. So to the east of the Dry Steppes, what we once thought was the Dry Steppes continuing all the way across to the eastern part of the continent, we now know as this sort of snowy mountainous region known as the Fractured Peaks. We took a lot of inspiration from those classic Victorian Gothic horror themes, so if you have a secret inner goth kid like I do, I think you're really gonna like this region a lot. So the people who live in the Fractured Peaks, they have this horrible anxiety all the time. They feel the hair on the back of their neck standing up. They feel like something is watching them from these dark ruins, these ancient old cathedrals. Something is waiting to prey on them when any moment of weakness strikes. When the sun goes down inside the Fractured Peaks, those towns, those doors get barred, they get locked. If you're outside in the nighttime and during the Fractured Peaks, you're as good as dead. If those monsters that are waiting in the shadows don't drain you of your blood, the cold will just freeze it in your veins. This is also the home to a group of religious zealots whose sort of fervent belief in their higher powers keep them feeling warm and safe on those dark, scary nights, but leave them completely ignorant of the dangers that are slowly encroaching upon them. To the south, We have the swamplands of Hawazar. Poison, disease, despair, they coat this whole region like a mold. Hawazar is so deadly. The fauna is ravenous for your flesh. The flora is poisonous. This is a place of madness, of black magic. Who can tell how much what you see is real or just some kind of fever dream? Those that come to Hawazar, they do so to be forgotten, to be lost. There are cutthroats, thieves, assassins, murderers that want to do their dark trades far out of the reach of the forces of like law and order, or groups like the Zakarum who might be able to put a stop to this. This is also the location where we have groups of swamp witches who worship massive snakes. If you saw the gameplay trailer, you might have caught a glimpse of one of them. They have dark knowledge that they may be willing to part with, but for a heavy price. And finally, we have the zone of Kyrgyzstan. So Kyrgyzstan was once a much larger empire that encompassed the sort of forests and jungles surrounding this area. But over time, those borders have kind of shrunk back down to this region that we once called the Borderlands. This is the last bastion of the Zakarum faith. Years of decadence and corruption have just caused them to sort of fall apart and lose the hearts and minds of the people who live in this region. They've been desperately trying to gain that faith back, but it's just not going well. In Diablo 3, we've actually visited some places in Kyrgyzstan. We went to Chaldeum, the Jewel of the East. We visited Alkarnas. Things were pretty bad in Diablo 3 for them. Guess what? They've gotten worse since then. This is also the location of a lot of really important events from Diablo's past. So the Sin War, a lot of that took place in Kyrgyzstan. The Mage Clan Wars, all of that kind of thing took place in Kyrgyzstan. There's a lot of history buried in the sands under Kyrgyzstan. And speaking of buried, we have these ancient triune cult ruins that radiate this dark power, sort of thrumming with dark energy. The triune who was responsible for helping Lilith return to Sanctuary, as you saw in our cinematic, they also worship the primevals, and they are hastening their master's return to Sanctuary. The people who live in Kyrgyzstan have just lost any hope of any kind of rescue. Demons are lurking in the sands around them. Lilith's agents wear the smiling faces of their friends and trusted family members. There's this horrible paranoia and suspicion that beats down on the people who live in Kyrgyzstan like the hot sun above them. So those are our 5 incredible regions that we're going to ship with Diablo 4. But the world isn't just a place. It's filled with lots of dangerous things besides you. And to talk a little bit more about the monsters that are going to inhabit the worlds of Sanctuary, I'd like to pass it off to my friend Candace.
Hi, everybody. My name is Candace Thomas. I'm a senior encounter designer for Diablo 4, and that feels really good to say out loud. What I do is I bottle up all of that story, all that history, all that lore, and I turn it into a combat experience. And what that actually means is that I tell you a story by punching you in the face. So what does that mean? I'll talk about the Drowned. So if you didn't get to play the demo, or if you're watching from home, you don't know who these people are because they're new to Diablo 4. But they've always been a threat to Sanctuary. So first, to tell you the story about them, I'll use my words. So these are monsters of legend in Sanctuary. They haven't been seen in generations, and most people don't even believe that they exist. These are like the terrors in the night that'll come in and kidnap you and drag you into the water and drown you. Villagers will tell the stories of these guys huddled around their campfires to scare their children at night. Like, if you don't go to bed on time, then the Drowned will come and take you.
It's a good villager voice.
Thank you.
It's a very good villager voice.
Thank you. But their effect is real. The bodies of the victims wash ashore and bloat in the midday sun. Ships are lost at sea. And on the first moonless night, after all of the omens have passed, the Drowned will appear. And the denizens of Sanctuary, believe it or not, they have to face it because now here they come to attack. And when they attack, they infect the shores like a disease. With them comes this thick, brackish fog that encroaches in from the shoreline. Ships are lost at sea, people are going missing, and everywhere you go, there's this constant, unyielding tolling of the bells, clamoring, reminding you the drowned are out there, and they're rallying to come and get you. So, that's how you tell a story with your words. Now, I want to talk about how I punch you in the face with it. So this is a lineup of the drowned. Early on, this is a concept piece that we encounter designers will use to inspire us to determine what they're going to do in combat. So on the the left, you can see the wretch. He's like the little guy, and they're numerous. There's a lot of them. Next to him is the sea witch, and she's a dungeon boss, and she's pretty cool. But I want to talk about the guy in the middle. He's the drowned juggernaut, because there's kind of a cool story about him. So if you look at him and you get inspired by this photo, it's perfect, right? Like he's supposed to be a heavy punisher, right? He's supposed to be a brute that has these vicious attacks. And that's perfect, except for one thing. That's kind of weird. Like, if knowing the story that I told you about the drowned and how they shamble in from the ocean and they kidnap you and they pull you out to sea, like, what story are we telling with that flail? You know, like, where does he get that thing? Is there, like, do we have to tell some story about, like, a store that he buys this from under the sea? Like, that redhead with the clamshells, does she, like, brush her hair with this thing? Like, what's the deal? So, instead of telling you the story of where he got the flail, we changed it because it felt wrong. And now you'll see that he has the mast of a ship that he attacks you with. And because their story, because that fog comes in, because the drowned come in and they bring the sea with them, to make it a complete thought, to kind of supplement the story that we're telling you with our words and with our world, you can see that in the apex of his slam, not only is he beating you with the mast of a ship, he's bringing the sea with him. He has this phantasmal wave attack that comes out, even though there's like no water nearby. And so this theme, we carry it across the entire monster family. You see the sea witch here, for the lack of a better word, has like a wave attack. She has geysers that come out. Even the little drowned wretches will lob little like water crystals at you. And really this is just to make the game more of a complete thought. And it's these little things that we're hoping that will carry through and make these monsters come to life in Diablo 4.